World War II is one of the bloodiest wars in the history of mankind. Over 60 million, or 3% of the world's population, were killed. Although it was a dark time for many in the United States, it brought along a new era of economic, social, and medical changes that shaped modern America. The biggest change to America was the end of the Great Depression and the beginning of a time of economic prosperity. During the war, this was fueled by the wartime defense industry. It was a time of extreme production and economic growth. This only increased when the war ended and the troops came back. Many troops came home, hung up their uniforms, and immediately put the war behind them. They focused on what was to come. With the newly implemented GI Bill, the returning troops had many opportunities. One option they had was starting their own business with the Guaranteed Loan Program. Between 1944 and 1962, the Veterans Administration gave out $50 billion in insured loans. The GI Bill also helped returning veterans find jobs. Tom Broderick took full advantage of this. He returned from the war permanently blinded from a Nazi sniper bullet, but was determined to be independent despite his lack of vision. When he returned to Chicago, the Veterans Administration helped him find classes to learn how to function in society without his sight. Once he got accustomed to living blind, they helped him find a job with an insurance company. Soon after that, he started his own insurance company with help from the GI loan system. His business quickly became highly successful. The GI Bill also provided assistance to veterans who wanted education. Nearly 10 million veterans took advantage of the education and job training programs offered by the Veterans Association. Also, $4 billion in unemployment assistance was paid out to veterans attending college or starting their own business. Although the GI Bill is expensive for the U.S. government, it proved to be an effective investment. It allowed millions of veterans returning from the war to hit the ground running in the new U.S. economy. The GI Bill is a crucial part of the economic prosperity that followed the Second World War. Another critical factor that contributed to America's military and economic success during this era was women being more involved in America's workforce. Women were in the workplace in larger numbers than ever before. They held jobs like never before as well. A woman who was a perfect example of this was Dorothy Hayner. She worked at the Ford Motor Company plant in Willow Run, Michigan. She helped manufacture military equipment such as the B-24 bombers that were crucial in both the European and Pacific theaters. She loved her job because she was helping her country and earning a living that allowed her to live independently. Although women played an essential role during the war, when it was over, the men wanted their jobs back. Many American women returned to more traditional gender roles. This is devastating for women like Dorothy Hayner, who lost their wartime jobs. Women in this time period were often housewives because there was no reason to work. Jobs are higher paying and more secure than ever. Usually, a middle-class family would only need one source of income. Though many women returned to their positions as housewives at the war's end, World War II was an important time for women in the U.S. It proved that they were fully capable of being independent and performing jobs formerly only for men. This is exemplified in the famous picture of Rosie the Riveter. This idea and image would eventually inspire a second wave of feminism during the 1960s. Women weren't the only group making strides during and after World War II. The black population in America was beginning their journey towards equal rights. The first piece of legislation passed by the U.S. government to stop discrimination was Executive Order 8802. It was passed in 1941 by President Franklin D. Roosevelt after a threat on a march on Washington. This order stopped racial discrimination within the national defense industry. Later on, in 1948, Executive Order 9981 was passed by President Harry Truman. This desegregated America's armed forces, which allowed blacks and whites to fight side by side during the Korean War. Another social reform that happened during and after the war was an increase in awareness of the mental strains of warfare. The term post-traumatic stress disorder wasn't coined until the 70s, but World War II was the war where the term combat fatigue was created. The U.S. Army also adopted the phrase, "every soldier has his breaking point." There were over 26,000 psychiatric cases reported from Okinawa alone. Sailors often went insane because of the threat of kamikaze attacks on their ships. To keep from going mad, they wouldn't be warned about nearby planes until they absolutely had to be. For the most part, people were accepting of battle fatigue during World War II. One famous exception to this was General George S. Patton. He slapped 2 soldiers in a hospital who were suffering from battle fatigue during the Sicily campaign. These 2 incidences happened on August 3rd and 10th, 1943. General Dwight D. Eisenhower acknowledged that this conduct was unacceptable, but only forced Patton to apologize to the men because Patton was such a critical leader. Although he was initially dealt no punishment, Patton was relieved from his command of the 7th Army after the incidences were broadcasted on radio by Drew Pearson on November 21st. The American public was outraged, so Eisenhower was forced to take decisive action. Treatment for battle fatigue wasn't nearly as effective or refined as it is today. Treatment usually involved giving soldiers time alone in a safe space. Although this is the most common form of treatment, there were other methods. These range from giving soldiers drugs such as sodium pentothal to dispersing alcohol to soldiers in some cases. Sodium pentothal was used as a truth serum. When given in small doses to a soldier, it would break down their mental barriers and allow them to open up during therapy sessions. Alcohol is a truth serum as well, but it most likely created more alcoholics than at-peace soldiers. In addition to an increase in mental health awareness, there were many other medical advances that occurred during and after the war. Drugs such as penicillin and morphine were critical for the Allies. Penicillin was especially important because it was the most effective antibacterial drug to date. Most soldiers carried it and were able to immediately administer it in order to sterilize the wound. All of these economic, social, and scientific advances that occurred during World War II can be compared to those of the First World War. Following World War I, America went into over a decade of economic prosperity. Also, the 19th Amendment was passed following the war, which allowed women to vote. In addition to these breakthroughs, World War I was one of the most innovative wars in history. It was considered to be the first modern war. Along with machine guns, tanks, and poisonous gas, there were many medical reforms, including the implementation of sanitary napkins on the battlefield. Although World War II is a bloody mess, it was the gateway to a more modern, advanced, and accepting American society. It was filled with breakthroughs in civil rights, workplace customs, medicine, and others. Lots of these changes are now staples in present-day America.